Okay. So again, all of the information that we're going to discuss today lives in one of two places: the international website, the Georgia website. To access them, there are different passwords. For international, it is unique to you. You create the password. If you ever forget it, just click the forgot password tab. And for Georgia, you will use the current username and password for 2025. Your chapter president should know it. If she does not, you just ask your board buddy. Some of the resources you will find on the websites are the P.E.O Constitution. That can be found on the international website, and it has duties for each officer. The Georgia bylaws can be found on the Georgia website, and that will give duties of each officer as defined by Georgia, a couple little additional items, and then the list of supplies for local chapter officers is on the international site. The IOLC, this is going to be the most important resource for all of you. Everything you really need is going to be found there. So if you don't remember anything else today, just remember IOLC. The most recent version was updated in September of 2024. The complete IOLC is available online. The president should print this. There should be a copy of the full IOLC in the president's book. Each officer can just download and print their individual section. So to find the IOLC, you will go onto the international site. You would log into P.E.O International. The easiest way to search on the international site is this little box on the bottom, or we're showing on the bottom as a shortcut. Just type in IOLC where the little microscope, or not microscope, looking glass is.
Fine glass.
And then just a note, international is frequently making changes. So when you are on the international site, you can click resources, and you should be able to go to the resource library, and most of the updated information will be on that first page or that second page, and you can see the date that the information was last updated. So we're going to jump right into some of the positions. I'm assuming some of you today are guard, and since I'm sharing my screen, I can't see everyone, so I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. So the guard's first responsibility is to conduct a visual verification of membership prior to starting the meeting. No longer is required is stating that Madam President, all who are present are entitled to remain. I've heard this at some local chapter meetings. It's okay if you do that. Just know that is not a requirement. And passwords are no longer taken or given verbally prior to a meeting. That went away during COVID. So one of the most important responsibilities of the guard is her role during the ceremony of initiation. Did you know there are specific instructions to the guard for the ceremony of initiation? Those can be found on the IOLC. There are 11 steps for setting up in-person initiation. And if you happen to do a virtual ceremony, there are 5 steps. Presidents, just a note, it is also important that you review these instructions and then practice with your guard prior to initiation. The guard sets the tone for initiation, so there is no rush. Take your time. The setting of the table should be deliberate and thoughtful. So for the chaplain conducts devotions of each meeting. Some recent changes include that a Bible or other devotional text is acceptable. It's not just the Bible. The Lord's Prayer is optional, but that is a decision made by the chapter. So it's not up to the chaplain if the Lord's Prayer is read or not, is a chapter decision. recommend that the chapter votes on it, and you revisit that periodically to see if that is still the chapter's decision. So if you decided 2 years ago that you're not going to read, you're going to continue with the Lord's Prayer, maybe it would be a good time to revisit that and to make sure that's what the chapter wants to continue to do. The chaplain's prayer wording was updated last in January of 2022. So recording secretary. And because Amy's gone, you guys are you're stuck hearing me a little bit extra today. So I apologize for that. So the recording secretary's job is to take the minute of each meeting and each special meeting. You record what is done at the meeting, not what was said. So it's just the facts neutrally without reflecting your personal opinion on any chapter decisions. So remember, if you put it in your chapter bylaws, that the secretary can send a draft minute of the minute, pardon me, the recording secretary will send out a draft of the minutes to the president to review. Once the president says okay, then she can send those minutes out to the chapter, primarily by email. But if you happen to have any sisters who don't have access to an email, and there are a few, then you would need to be able to mail the minutes to those sisters. If you do that, you do not have to read those minutes at your next meeting, but it must be voted on and put in your bylaws before you can follow that procedure. Okay. So there is a template for minutes. It can be found on the international website at the magnifying glass. Search for, I did put magnifying glass in my notes, by the way. So type minutes template, and that should come up for you. And then in the IOLC, in the recording secretary section, you will also find instructions for taking minutes. Corresponding secretary. Right. The corresponding secretary's job is to give a monthly report. The correspondence can be summarized except when noted, and that it must be read in its entirety. So I've been in several chapter meetings where every single piece of correspondence is read in full, and that's not required. It will tell you at the top of the correspondence if you must read it in full. So it's customary, but not required that the correspondence be read in the order of international, then state, and then local. Again, that is not a requirement. So if you read it out of order, no one's going to catch on fire, as Kathleen will sometimes say. So when you give the correspondence report, if there was no correspondence that was sent, you will just simply say no correspondence was sent. And if no correspondence was received, surprise, you're going to say no correspondence was received. It is the corresponding secretary's job to let international know who's who in your chapter. And we're in the middle of this right now. And I know P.E.O's put some things out on Facebook encouraging people to accomplish this task. So this reporting includes officers, delegates for convention, not just Georgia convention. This is an international convention year. So if your chapter has delegates for international convention, and there's only a handful of chapters selected each year or each international year to do that, but they have to be reported, and the alternates also have to be reported. So in March, they'll give notice of elected chapter officers, elected Georgia convention delegates and alternates. In March, in international years. This is an odd year. You will also give nominees for the delegates and alternates for international convention. And then as soon as you guys have worked out your committees, you will go in and give your appointed chairs. Okay. Oh, important note. Even if somebody is doing the office for a second year, you do need to go in and update them. Otherwise, it will look like you did not report. So if Claire Hetherington served as membership chair last year and she's going to do it for a second year, you still need to log in and update her as being elected this year or being, taking the committee this year. So you also will send an invitation to membership and invitation to transfer. So after a pro vote is taken at a meeting to invite somebody to either join your chapter or transfer to your chapter, it's your job to invite them. Now, no transfers happen in February, but you can initiate in February. Just note that if you initiate a member in February, that they will pay the $35 in addition to the next year's dues. If there are any changes to anyone's status or contact information, it is the responsibility of the corresponding secretary to let international know. They have no clue that someone new joined P.E.O. unless you tell them. They also don't know if someone happened to enter chapter eternal unless you tell them, or if someone moved or got a new email address. So a individual member does have the ability to update her own contact information. So you might want to double check with her to see if she's already done it or she'd like help doing it. If it's a sister who struggles a little bit with technology, just go ahead and update that information for her. Now, the only time you can someone can be placed on an inactive status is the last day of February. If they've paid their dues, they are not inactive. They are just, maybe if they're not coming to your chapter meetings, they just may be non-participating. But the only time you can go inactive is when you don't pay your dues. And then to access the membership update form, you would log into P.E.O. International. Under membership, you would manage membership, scroll down, and you can get access the updated information. Laura? You unmute?
Hi.
Are you forwarding them,
Yeah,
Teresa?
I will forward it. I was just waiting for you to unmute.
Okay, I'm sorry. There we go. The treasurer has a variety of different roles. The first role you have is taking role. This is a new year, so you should have a new role. This is where you will take your initiates and now re-alphabetize them within the chapter. So you're going to move those initiates that have been at the bottom of your list and put them within your chapter. The next initiate you have, though, will be at the bottom as far as role is concerned. When you finish the role, when you go to call roll, you'll notice over in the column, if you number it 1, 2, 3, it makes it easier when you get to the bottom to say, Madam President, there are 17 members responding to roll call. You also want to include your number of visitors as well as if anybody is on hybrid. So you would have 17 members responding to roll call, 2 on hybrid, and 2 visitors. Your hybrid members are still a part of your chapter totals. So you could say there are 19 with 2 on hybrid. Money, money, money. That's what the treasurer is all about. As soon as you get money, deposit it into the chapter bank account. Each of you should have your own local chapter where you deposit the money. Those are considered receipts, and then disbursements is money that's going out. So although everybody is intimidated by the role of the treasurer, it's all about bringing the money in and having the money go out. Uh, disbursements must be approved by a chapter vote. Anything, the questions that I get this year are, do we have to vote on this? In the back of your mind, anything having to do with money should be voted upon. Just, in your bylaws, if we're going to make a change in our bylaws, if it affects money, the chapter needs to vote on it. Oh, well, we're just going to give her $100 donation. As soon as you said any kind of an amount, any money, it needs to have the chapter's approval. Where can I find instructions? Say it with me. The IOLC has all the information you need for the chapter treasurer record book. That will list how you have to have your list. Several people ask me about this. So your checkbook register is different than mine, what I do on the state level. So your best reference first and foremost is always to go to this page of the record book, and that'll have it for you. When you go to your meeting, after you call roll, you will give the monthly treasurer's report. Again, money that comes in, money that goes out. You will begin by saying, our beginning balance is, here's the balance. Our total receipts. Receipts can be money from fundraising, money from donations, money from ways and means. If you have a gift basket and you want to put it in there, all of that, any money that comes in is a receipt. Then money goes out. Where am I spending my money on? I had to buy stamps. I had to pay for printing. I had to pay for, I gave money to the projects. I gave money I paid our dues this month. So you take money in, you subtract it, you subtract money out, and that should be your total chapter assets. If you balance each month, by the time you come to March to do your annual report, it should be pretty easy to do that IRS report. Monthly report errors. It's okay. We all make mistakes. So often we're like, oh, we're perfectionists, I'm going to make a mistake. I've made a couple mistakes on the state level. If you make a mistake, it's okay. That's what your sisters are here for. Ask your sister for help. Reach out. They've done this before. We're here to help you. Your sisters in your chapter can help you. Those who have been treasurer can help you. And we can always play, can I stump my board buddy? So you can call your board buddy, you can call your state treasurer, and I'll help walk you through it. Mostly it could be a dyslexic, you flip the numbers on the receipts or the bank disbursements. My biggest hint to you is just take your time, do it in a quiet moment where you're ready to work on your books. And if it doesn't work, don't pull your hair out, put it aside and ask for help. The other thing the treasurer gets to do is spend some of the money. Your job is, especially right now at the beginning of your new year, is to check with all of your officers and find out if they need new supplies. Ask your corresponding secretary, do you have enough invitations? Do you have transfer letters? Do you have Look in your list of supplies for membership cards. So this is a really good time. At the top, you'll see those are project cards. I don't know if they're printing them anymore, but you could ask your project chairs if they want to go online and if there is something they need. So this is a really good time to maybe send out an email to all of your officers and say, please review your supplies. Do you need me to order something? I would make that order, say, once a year. Bills. Bills are nice to be presented. My big hint to you is to say, please present them to the treasurer prior to the meeting. You do not have to wait when you're giving your Ways and Means report. Oh, we have to pay the pecan bill, and here it is, $2,000. Go ahead and present that bill to your treasurer prior to the meeting. If you know there's a bill that is coming up, the treasurer, you could say, hey, do you have that bill? Would you go ahead and present it? When you make that presentation, it's Madam President, I move to reimburse Gabby for the $13 for birthday cards. And then that will need to be seconded. Can we use Venmo? Sure. The one problem with Venmo is it needs to be tied to a phone number. So it needs to have somebody in your chapter who's willing to set that up. You also can use PayPal or Zelle or a debit card, but you cannot at this time use credit cards to pay any PEO funds. This is your contribution form. This is the form that you've been sending me with your chapter contributions. The pink are all the international projects. I'm so proud of George's chapters this year who have donated in that first column up here, ELF, PCE, PSA, STAR, who have given, if you have $500 on that blank, you will become a designated award winner for that project. COTI has a variety of different ways. If you give to COTI, you can split it into say, where do I want those funds to go? Questions I do get is down here. Like if I wanted to give to the Katie Henry PCE fund, does that count for giving to PCE? No, it does not. The only way you can be a designated award chapter is it must have the $500 listed up here. Well, what does that do? This money, the Katie Henry Fund, goes to the P.E.O. Foundation. When they receive it, when I type this up, it will go to PCE with the Katie Henry Fund recognition, but it is going to the foundation first and not PCE. Okay, that is true for any of these in this part. So whether it's Karen Fight, the Kathleen Blake, those are going to the foundation first and then to the actual project. The green are all Georgia foundations. So many of you have a scholarship or a fund that you have established that is down here. Again, that money will be a part of the Georgia Foundation. So if you think of the foundation as a pie and each part of the foundation is divided into 50 pieces, one of those pieces is Georgia. And then all of these go into that fund, as well as the ones at the bottom of the purple. The purple ones are funds that the chapter themselves regulate, and they have to establish their own committee for interviewing. So all these, all the checks are made payable to the Georgia State chapter. The state treasurer consolidates these and sends them on. I really would strongly urge you to get these in February. Because what happens is when the state treasurer is getting annual dues at the same time as contributions, it becomes a big mess. So we would appreciate if you can send your chapter contributions in January and February. Now, another question I have gotten this year is, well, we have a donor who wants to give $10,000 to our chapter to give to STAR. Will they get a tax deduction? No. If any money that is put on this chapter contribution form is not tax deductible. If they want the tax deduction, they will have to go to the international website, or you could provide the individual contribution form. That individual contribution form goes directly to directly to P.E.O, and they could put $10,000 to PCE, and then they would get the deduction because it's going directly to P.E.O. Chapters do not get the tax deduction. Only the P.E.O. sisterhood in Des Moines can give you the tax deduction. Those are the two big questions I've gotten this year.
Laura, we're getting some background noise, so I'm gonna mute everyone. So you're gonna have to unmute yourself when I do this real quick.
Okay. And so in our period of giving, the stuff that's in pink on the contribution form is the biggest chunk, and that is where our biggest amount of giving should be. This helps us to be compliant with IRS. To stay in our 501c parameters, we must have more money going to the foundation, then less money going to the state. And then the third is community support. Community support could be money you give to scholarship recipients, money that you want to give to a local charity, anything like that. But that local charity should not be more than what you're giving to the P.E.O. Foundation. Notice of dues. Well, we've collected our dues. Fabulous, fabulous. I've gotten everybody's. Like I said, I'm just waiting for 13 checks to come in. It's the Postal Service, so fingers crossed. But you can send out that dues check at any time. You could, if your chapter gives Christmas cards or winter cards, you could stick that and say the perfect gift to give this year would be your chapter dues. So to kind of remind that it is coming. Dues are, you must have your dues turned in by February 28th or 29th. If we do not receive that, then you are marked as inactive, as Teresa said. So there is this notice of dues. The helpful part about this is that it will tell you how much of your money will go to international, which is 36, how much will go to the state, which next year is going to be 32. You gave 26 this year, but next year, hopefully for a while, it will be 32, making that at least $68 of your dues is being dispensed out. For those of you who are also keeping track, you will notice this year there was a $50 technology fee. I feel like we're Ticketmaster. There's always a fee. So go ahead and budget that $50 in there. That's also going to be a part of that overall money. So, but each member is going to end up paying $68 of their dues is going out. So if you have $70 is your chapter dues, your chapter will only have $2 per member for the local chapter. So you want to do a reflection of that and determine, is this enough money to have for our operating expenses? Is your local dues? So when you pay your dues, that is the last check to be written. So if you are writing your contributions, you want to make your contributions on February 27th, and then the last check you wrote was your dues check for dated February 28th or 29th. And and you will also give each member a membership card when they pay their dues. Annual reports. Oh, I'm not done. Well, we have completed our annual report procedure. I think it was easier this year. That was kind of my impression. I'd be glad to take your feedback on that. The helpful part is there's lots of good training videos. I kept going back, watching them even through this whole process. So they are helpful to try that first. Next. The corresponding secretary was sort of taken out of the flow chart. Her job was to check and make sure everybody is on roll. So as Teresa mentioned earlier, it's really important that your corresponding secretary has gone in and updated. Did I have an initiate? Did we have reinstatements? Did we have somebody entering chapter eternal? That should be done before February 28th. So that is saying my chapter is ready. Then the treasurer looks at that. She looks at how many members she's collected dues from. Those are now active members, and then multiplies that by the 26 or 32 and comes up with a total. She sends that, hits submit. Here is the problem I have with several people. They hit submit and it went to the president, but on the left-hand side, it said sign. So it's very important that you sign it and then submit it. And the same thing with the president. She had it, she hit submit, but didn't sign it. So it comes to my box and it'll say, oh, it's sitting in the local chapter president's box, or it's sitting in the local chapter treasurer's box. So that's when I would come back and say, you probably haven't signed, you need to go back. So it's not that yours is incorrect. It's just that that signature tells me you're done with your responsibilities. Next. Then when you finish, you'll do the IRS-LC. This is just the big annual report that says money came in, money went out. It's just like your monthly statement. Here is our beginning balance. This is the money we all took in. This is the money we all took out. And this is our ending balance. So line D, your ending balance should equal line E. And it seemed to have gone easier this year. So thank you. Done.
So next for the presidents and vice presidents. So being president doesn't mean that you have to do everything by yourself. It is a bit of a juggling act, but you don't have to do it alone. So be sure to delegate things when you can to your other officers. All right, the president is responsible for the safekeeping of the president's supplies. That includes the president's book, the ceremony of initiation booklets, the tax ID number, the charter of the chapter, all of the president's letters for the life of your chapter, the sponsor for membership forms, annual reports, and a full IOLC should be printed. That includes the policies and procedures. So it's all the officer information and the policies and procedures, and that should be behind the IOLC tab in the president's book. And your job is to conduct all meetings from the president's book. It's a complete script that provides step-by-step instructions. For those of you who have not actually seen the inside of it, it is play by play. It tells you when to stand up, when to sit down, tells you when to tap the gavel, all sorts of things. So if you are a new president, it behooves you to read through the whole thing just so that you're kind of comfortable where things are. From time to time in a meeting, you might need to access some of the information that are in the appendices. I always found that helpful to pull that appendices out and place it in the order of where it was going to be coming up in the meeting. And that way I didn't have to flip back and forth, and then I just put it back where it belonged after the meeting. Additionally, the president's book is now available online on the international website, but it cannot be printed, downloaded, or emailed. But if in the event that you are left without the book, you still have access to it, so you can follow through the meeting if you pull it up on something electronic. Tabbed section. So the president's book has different tab sections. The first one is the chapter meeting. The second one we just talked about was the appendices. There are times when you may be holding a special meeting, and there are rules and procedures for that. There's procedures for installation of officers, for initiation, the tab for the IOLC, and then a tab for the bylaws, Georgia bylaws. It's always good to have a copy of that too. If any questions come up during your meeting, you have quick access to finding out what the rules are on that. And then the new member council booklet. And then just be aware that for the Georgia bylaws, revisions are typical to occur. If we have any amendments that have, in our bylaws, in our conventions in May, then there will be changes to those documents following the convention. Chapter meeting. So when you are looking at the overview of a chapter meeting, the first thing is call to order, opening ode, objects, and aims, devotions. Recording secretary gives the minutes. If there's an initiation, that happens next. Then the report of the treasurer, report of the corresponding secretary, any committee reports, your unfinished business, your new business, and then presentation for names of membership. So what is a good suggestion for the committee reports is if you have like a sign-up sheet prior to the meeting, and you have 3 committees, you might have 9 committees in your chapter, and 3 of them have reports. Let them just sign up that they have reports, so that when you get ready to hit that part of the meeting, you can just say, committee 1, 2, and 3 instead of having to list all of them. It just kind of streamlines your meeting if you know who needs to speak on certain things. And then note that the presentation of names for membership is required at every meeting. Some people don't want to do that. They've asked, and it's like, nope, because we always want to encourage new sisters. So every meeting requires that. So, and if applicable, if something is going on in your in the calendar of your year, if you're sponsoring for membership, or you're proposing somebody for membership, if you're balloting for membership, if you are electing officers, if you're installing officers, and if you have any visitors visiting, then you will note that in the remarks for the visitors. And then at the end of the meeting, there's suggestions for the good of the chapter. In the appendices, there is one section on general information, business that can be conducted at a special meeting. If you call a special meeting for a particular point of business, that is the only business that you can discuss at that special meeting. There's procedure for an election of a chair pro tem in case your president and vice president are not available for a particular meeting. There's information on preparing for initiation, how to amend your local chapter bylaws and standing rules, how to treat a main motion, counted ballots, an invitation to transfer, sponsor for membership form not receiving 3 signatures, balloting procedure, votes casted to exceed number entitled to vote and how you handle that. And then the procedure for election of officers, delegates, and alternates. And then there's installation of an officer elected but not installed. So maybe on that March meeting when you're trying to install your officers, one may not be there, might not be able to be there. So whoever's serving in that role continues as the officer until the next one is installed. And then there is a nice little way to reaffirm your vows, which is kind of a nice thing to do periodically in your chapter to sort of revitalize the heart of your chapter. Special meetings. So a business which can be transacted at a special meeting is the acceptance of a transfer letter, an audit report, an initiation, an invitation renewed, name presented and proposed, official visit, the president's letter, report of convention, the representation of a name, request for an ELF loan, or voting on sponsoring a project recipient. But the business that cannot be transacted is balloting on a name, consideration of a request for reinstatement, or invitation to transfer. So basically kind of membership stuff cannot be transacted at a special meeting. And that just kind of safeguards a small group trying to influence your membership. That should be a chapter decision. So we don't have that problem in Georgia. Next. All right, tips for running a swift and successful meeting. Preparation is absolutely the key. Many presidents use a meeting agenda, and there is an online template which just kind of helps you flow through things that are going on, especially if you have like unfinished business from a previous meeting. It's nice to have that remembered. Like I said before, use a committee sign-up sheet. Definitely read through the meeting in advance. And then I would invest in sticky notes. That's what I did when I was chapter president, and I covered up all the things that I did not have to deal with in that meeting. Because when you open that book and there's all these words coming at you, it can be overstimulating. So just, if you're not initiating somebody, cover up initiation. If you're not electing and installing your officers, cover all of that up. And just that way you can kind of flip through and just look at the things that you're needing to deal with in that particular meeting. Arrive early and start on time. Your sisters will appreciate that. And as we talked about before with the draft minutes, with the chapter vote, the reading of the minutes can be foregone only if all members have received the draft minutes. Provisions for those without email addresses must be made. So postal service, hand delivered, whatever, as soon as they can get that. I'd also like to note that if your chapter has decided to do this, 1, it has to be in your chapter bylaws. 2, this procedure does not open up the gates for all the chapter members to send to the recording secretary all of their revisions and changes and things that they feel are wrong or whatever. That's not the point of this. This is for you to have the information. If you have corrections or things to discuss about it, you need to bring that to the next chapter meeting so that everybody has the opportunity to hear that. And then the chapter votes on minutes as corrected if necessary. So just be aware of that. Ensure that your officers and committees understand their roles and the expectations of those roles. Ask your committees to do their work outside of the business meeting and come ready to present a final summary instead of trying to decide which restaurant to go to for your next social at the meeting. Just present where you're going to have it at the meeting. Help to minimize the idle conversations. Respectfully give attention to the person who has the floor during the meeting, and then understand and implement proper procedures and make the meetings fun. If you're not having fun, why would anybody else be having fun? All right, and here's a general timeline for things that happen, the sort of the calendar of events. In March, that's the beginning of the local chapter fiscal year from March to February. So in March, you're installing your new officers and you're transitioning from the previous officer to you. You're appointing your committees. This is a good time to submit your bylaws changes, and they are due by March 10th if you've made changes. Then in March, we have these local chapter workshops, and sometime in April, you will get your annual report release letters. Once the state has done their annual report to international, then you will get released that you passed and you everything balanced and we're all doing well. In May, we have our state convention. That's when you need to submit the yearbook for the previous year. So whatever the ending year date is for your yearbook, that's the convention you take it to. So like this year, when you go to the 2025 convention, you're going to bring your 24-25 yearbook to the historian for display. In September, in the odd numbered years is when we have the international convention. And at this point, based on the number of chapters we have in the state of Georgia, we're eligible to have 10 delegates. And so there will be 10 chapters sending delegates for that. In the fall is when we do our official visits and board buddy calls. For the roster at convention, we'll list all of the chapters that are receiving official visits. If you are not receiving an official visit, you will be receiving a board buddy call from your designated board buddy. In January, that is when, if you want that chapter distinction of being a designated award chapter, all of those donations are due by January 31st to the treasurer. And then in January also, we have our Founders Day, and it is being rebranded by International to be the International P.E.O. Day of Service. And so they're encouraging chapters to put on all their daisies and stars and go out and do some service in their own communities. In February, the dues are due, and the president's letter is also due. So that's the year at a glance. And official visits. So don't be afraid of official visits. The purpose of these is to give each chapter an opportunity to meet one-on-one with a state board member, and in that time frame to celebrate your successes, assess any of the needs your chapter may have, provide you with updated tools and ideas, and offer assistance as needed. So an official visit in Georgia, we do them approximately every 3 years. So it's a 3-year rotation. So you'll have an official visit and then 2 board buddy calls, and then you'll come back on the official visit. For brand new chapters, we visit you each year for the first 3 years, just to make sure you're getting a good foundation and getting started. And then after that, you roll into that 3-year revolving schedule. And don't get worried. We contact the presidents well in advance and give detailed instructions of what to expect. And it really is. We're not coming in with white gloves and checking out everything. We're not digging through your supplies. We just want to make sure that you have the tools that you need to be successful. And if you don't, then we want to help provide those to you. Board buddy calls. So if you're not getting the official visit, you're going to get a board buddy call. And the chapter president will, and the board buddy will have a Zoom call or a phone call in the fall. It's sort of a mini official visit. Again, it's just to check in and to give a one-on-one opportunity with a state board member to just make sure you're going to be successful. That's all that we want for you guys is success. So, but if something's not going well, we need to know what that is so that we can help address it. Bonus tip. All right, this is for vice presidents. You don't have to wait for the president to be absent to preside over a meeting. You can practice running a meeting when the president is there, and she'll be right there to assist you with any questions, and you'll feel more comfortable if you have to run a meeting in the future. So, and again, just take some time and read through the president's book and get familiar with that so that it's not so intimidating, because it's big and thick and it looks kind of scary, but it really isn't. I'd even suggest doing a program on the president's book with your chapter. And just go through it and show them all the parts and pieces and everything, because they'll appreciate you more when you're up there on the podium. All right. And do you want to do that, Teresa, or do you?
Oh, okay, so all of the resources that we've run through today, and I know there was a lot of information that we presented. These next 2 slides have all the resources. These are clickable links, and once we are completed with the local chapter workshops, we will get these up on the Georgia website for you. So there's resources for each of the officer positions. So guard, chaplain, secretary, both secretaries are on this slide. Treasurer, vice president, and president, and annual reporting are on this last slide. So if I can escape out of that, and then I need to stop sharing my screen. Kathleen, I do not see, there, I got it.
Small pan.
All right, so I stopped to sharing my screen. There was some good questions on chat, and Kathleen's gonna jump in here.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Peggy. Always coming in hot with great questions. So I appreciate you asking them. I'm going to pass this one off because when I did annual reports, they were still physical, and I have not done them electronically. So the question was, we had made a mention in the presentation that annual report should be in a chapter supplies/notebook. How do we do that since they are electronic? Are we provided with something that we're able to print out, or what does that look like?
Would you like for me to speak to that?
Anyone who knows the answer.
Okay. That is a little bit of a question that we're kind of deciding, because it is a requirement for you to maintain annual reports for 6 years. That's what the retention rule is in the IOLC. And now that they're electronic, we may have year 1 on Susie's computer and year 2 on Emily's computer and all of that. And so I am working on messaging that out, trying to decide exactly how we want to handle that. But I think in the meanwhile, you need to print them out and keep them. And you have that ability to do at the end of annual reports. In fact, and if you haven't done them, if you haven't printed them this year, you still have the ability to do that. They don't shut that down until June 30th. But I would request that you guys go in there and run off your membership roster, which lists all of your active and inactive members, and then also a copy of your IRSLC, which is just that overview of how you spent your money. But those are things in the past that we always had they were like in triplicate and handwritten, like in Kathleen's day. And I actually am the first one that did them electronic. So I'm the one that had 1 year I did them paper, and the next year I did them electronically on the board. So, so I was the first to kind of kick that off. But that's what I would recommend right now, so that you have those records.
Thank you, Piri.
You're welcome.
And then the next one also you'll probably want to answer, and it's a great question, and very few people don't usually think about this. How are chapters chosen to go to international convention?
Hey, so like I said a little bit earlier, because of how many chapters we have in Georgia, we're eligible for 10 delegates. So for every 7 chapters, we get a delegate. So they round up. We have 68, so they round up to 70. We have 10 delegates. So what we had done years ago, when there used to be a grouping committee on the state that sort of looked at that, and the 2 jobs they had were to figure out the delegates for Convention of International, and also hostess chapters for the state conventions. And so they combined those 2 systems, divided the state into 10 geographical regions, and then lump all of the chapters that fall into that geographic region, and then just rotate all just through the list so that there is one representative from all areas of the state going to international. And so it's just a matter of who your neighbors are. Some chapters, there's fewer in some regions than there are in others, and so they run through the list a little faster. And if a chapter isn't able to get a delegate or is unable to go for some reason, we just rotate them back around and slide the next chapter over. And we've been doing that probably for at least 10 years, I think is when we made the 10 regions.
So in short, there's a massive spreadsheet where there is one person, all of the chapters are lined up, and we just make sure that there is equal representation when we go through the list. There are a couple caveats. There are years when a chapter actually declines to send someone based on various different reasons. And what we do in that case is we move on to the next person in line, again, in order to make sure that everyone gets an equal chance to go to CIC. Awesome.
And then locally, the local chapter, once they find out that they're eligible to go, then they choose their own delegate and an alternate. So the local chapter actually votes for the actual warm body that goes. On the state level, we choose the chapter.
All right. If you have additional questions, drop them in the chat so we can answer them. They can be officer specific because somebody else may be wanting to hear about them. Or if you know how to do the raise your hand icon, we can call on you. If not, this works too. Waving your hands.
Also, just want to use this opportunity. You should have seen on the invitation. We are going to hold a breakout on April 5th for each of the individual officers. I should rephrase that. We're gonna have the secretaries at one time, the treasurers at another time, and the vice president and president together. So we are encouraging experienced and new to join on those particular times so that the experience can jump in and help answer some of the questions that the new may have. But that way you get some more in depth, especially if you really haven't had an opportunity to do your new office. You may get an opportunity before the April 5th Zoom breakout, and that way you might say, wait, I didn't know this. So
Those invitations are on the Georgia website.
We have any other questions? Everyone's feeling really good about their responsibilities. I always try to remind people in PEO that your best is good enough. We can figure out all of the rest. All right. Well, if there's no questions, Teresa, we will be moving on to our general session. Is that right?
yep.
Okay.
Yes. So just as a lead in, and I don't know if she is on this call, is
She's here. I saw her.
Stacy Hagan. I'm gonna make you say hi.
I am here. Hello, everyone.
So this is Stacy Hagan. She is on the finance committee. Next year she'll be the finance committee chair. I just wanted her to say hi because she is amazing, and we had a task force that the finance committee parented. The task force was given the objective, and I'm saying this, but she also tells you in the presentation, of finding ways to help the state save money. You know, we raise dues, but that's not gonna last forever. And our biggest expense is convention. So she put together this little task force. She was a taskmaster and kept us on track and really gave us some focus. So I'm going to share my screen now, and so we can watch her presentation.
Looks good on our end. It's not playing, Teresa. Is it playing on your end?
It was playing.
We don't hear or see any movement or anything.
Really?
Hmm.
Do you want to try it on your computer? I don't know what's going on.
I will have to find it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But it was playing. I had no clue.
I
Let me
figured.
stop sharing for a moment.
I have to figure out where it lives. Hold on.
The conclusion of the 2024 Georgia
Can you guys
State
hear that?
Convention.
Yes.
All right, great. Stacy, I know you love hearing your voice. I promise I've been there before. You're like, let me get to my full screen.
At the conclusion
Can you guys hear and see that?
Yes.
Awesome,
Yeah.
let's do it.
of the 2024 Georgia State Convention, our newly installed state president, Kathleen Blake, encouraged us all to think outside. She encouraged us to get out and explore the great outdoors as a way to reconnect with nature, our sisters, and the values we share, and as a source of inspiration for growth in our own lives and the lives of our chapters. She also encouraged us to think outside in terms of thinking differently, creatively, and outside the box, to be open to new perspectives and approaches for fundraising, growing chapter membership, finding project applicants, and all the other ways we seek to make a difference through P.E.O. Kathleen's message and the leadership of the full state board has been important and inspirational for a task force that I've had the honor of chairing for the past 15 months. Today, I'd like to tell you about that task force and the work we've conducted. First, a little background. My name is Stacy Hagan, and I am the current president of Chapter Z Atlanta. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of working on the State Finance Committee. This committee consults with and advises the state board on financial affairs. We prepare and present an annual budget each year at convention, and we propose how funds will be allocated across our 3 major areas of expense: general and administrative expenses like meetings, supplies, and travel throughout Georgia, international convention travel and required leadership meetings for state board members, and finally, our annual state convention. Did you know that the cost of running state convention represents a significant portion of the annual operating budget for Georgia State Chapter? Did you know that annual dues are the only source of revenue for Georgia State Chapter? In the fall of 2023, the Finance Committee and State Board recognized the need to propose an amendment to increase state dues. That dues increase was approved at the 2024 convention. The increase was necessary because there had not been an annual state dues increase since 2007, and there has been significant inflation since that time, affecting everything from supplies to travel costs, and especially the cost of running state convention. Certainly, each of you has experienced these increases in your personal lives and your P.E.O. chapters. Even with the increase in dues, we recognize that inflation will continue, particularly in the travel and hospitality industries, and a dues increase alone will prove insufficient in the years to come. It is essential that we also find ways to grow our membership while we reduce our expenses. So the state board authorized establishing a task force to evaluate how we run state convention. The task force was assigned this charter to examine state convention planning practices and convention execution for effectiveness and efficiency, and to make recommendations for changes as needed. The first step was assembling experienced sisters with the courage to think outside. Our task force is comprised of a current state board member, a past state president, a finance committee member, a former convention chair, a convention treasurer, and importantly, we included an outside expert in change management to help us think through the impact of our ideas on the sisterhood. We quickly established two guiding principles for our work. We agreed that any recommendation should maintain the power of connection at convention, that feeling when you walk in the door, and the reunion aspect of convention, and embrace the views of both young and older members to retain our sisters. Then we got busy. We knew we weren't the only state grappling with these challenges, and we wanted to think outside by learning from others. So we sent a custom design survey to all SPD treasurers and received 23 responses. We asked about how they fund their convention. We asked about their convention length, format, and location. We asked about who attends and how their expenses are covered. We conducted follow-up interviews with 6 different states because we were intrigued by their unique responses and we wanted to learn more. We looked at the history of Georgia State Convention expenses going back to 2000 to identify trends related to location, room costs, meal prices, technology and AV equipment, and more. We discovered that another committee had conducted overlapping analysis between 2008 and 2011. Their work included a survey of chapters, so we studied their results and recommendations, some of which have been implemented. Finally, we researched alternative locations and sought proposals to compare prices and make sure we get the most for our money. We learned a great deal. And we imagined new approaches by thinking outside. We reported back to the state board every 2 to 3 months, sharing our findings and ideas. We were transparent, including sharing ideas that we recommended not to pursue at this time. For example, we want to avoid another dues increase as long as possible. Likewise, we recommended not to impose a convention assessment on chapters or on members, which is a strategy used by some other states. We considered streamlining how many Golden Girls are recognized each year, but we think this celebration of sisters is important. We considered using professional event planners, and we researched conference centers that cater to businesses, neither of which was recommended at this time. We also agreed that while reducing to 1 delegate per chapter would save money, our membership is not yet large enough to pursue this idea. Some of the ideas generated were quickly and easily accepted and incorporated into immediate plans. For example, we are pursuing multi-year agreements with hotels to gain more favorable terms. We recognize there are pros and cons to this idea, such as the inconvenience it may cause for chapters, especially hostess chapters, that are farther away from the location. Yet the benefits outweigh the downsides in this case. We are continuing to simplify meals, including making breakfast optional, which seems to be an easy change to adapt to. Audio-visual and technology costs are skyrocketing at our convention locations. So we are already planning very carefully about how space is used, so we eliminate unnecessary AV setup costs and duplication whenever possible. We also recognize that we can easily limit scholarship luncheon guests to reduce costs and still have a meaningful celebration. And finally, there were ideas that were intriguing, and the task force worked to further develop them with specific proposals to the state board. One fun idea is to not only be creative, but also business savvy with our convention store so that we can generate more revenue from store sales. We learned about marvelous examples of very successful convention stores from other states, and that it requires a more dedicated approach with committed, experienced advisors to guide hostess chapters, manage year-to-year inventory, design merchandising and promotions, etc. We can be very intentional about setting goals that increase revenue and profits. Starting small with a few core products with wide-ranging prices, we can build from there as we have success, maybe even including an online component for sales throughout the year in the future. This was a fun idea to think through that we believe could add some pizzazz to our convention and be well received by hostess chapters. We also recommended the state board consider establishing a convention committee as a new standing committee in the state. This committee would be equipped with expertise in hotel contract negotiation, store inventory management, merchandising, revenue and profit targets, and meals and lodging registration and payment technologies. By having this sustained expertise at the state level each year, we would reduce the burden on hostess chapters to figure out all these logistics. An established committee with the needed expertise would allow us to continue to improve these areas each year and avoid relearning and reinventing the wheel, so to speak. This idea can be tested with an ad hoc committee at the president's discretion. If successful, an amendment to state bylaws would be required to establish this as a new standing committee. The task force provided our state board with very specific ideas for how this could be implemented. We also recommended our state presidents consider shortening convention to one night. This does not require a bylaws change, but is a choice available to each state president as she plans for her convention. We found numerous other states have used this approach for years. And while it was an adjustment at first, it pays off in many ways. This idea has the single greatest impact to cost reduction, with estimates of more than a 30% reduction in state expense and approximately 50% reduction in chapter expense. It likely requires virtual workshops to be held in advance and other adjustments such as eliminating outside entertainment to enable a compressed schedule. The task force partnered with the executive board to create some sample agendas, and we all recognize that it would be very important to communicate the rationale for this type of change and help sisters manage the change process. As the work of the task force comes to a close, we are grateful for the opportunity to get to know new sisters while working on a project that truly matters in our state. The partnership between the task force members, the finance committee, and state board members was fantastic. Everyone practiced thinking outside and welcomed new ideas. And Georgia State Chapter of P.E.O. will continue to grow and flourish as we work to celebrate, educate, and motivate women for years to come. Thanks for listening to this update. I hope it has been informative and encourages you to think outside.
Lots of a round of applause you got there, Stacy. If anyone missed convention last year, she also gave a presentation at for the finance committee, and that's when we all decided she will do all the presentations from now on because she's absolutely amazing at it. Well, we wanted to share that information with you all. We are so incredibly thankful and impressed by this committee that was put together this year. They absolutely blew me away. They were very intentional about the work they did, the research they did, also very intentional about how this was communicated, in what order, and this was part of their communication plan, was to start to provide some of this information at local chapter workshops. So we've heard mostly positive feedback. I know that we still have a lot of questions on certain things, but wanted to kind of open the floor, especially since we are so lucky to have Stacy here today. Does anyone have any questions, comments, just kind of any feedback about what was just presented?
was fabulous. How can we share it with our chapters? I have a lot of members who are concerned, and this
Great
would really be great.
I promise I didn't stage Peggy to ask all these wonderful questions. Yeah, so what we wanted to do was take this recording. It was presented last weekend in Dublin, obviously today, and then we'll do it again in Marietta next week. I would like to make it available on the website as our April town hall. So it won't be a live town hall next month, but it will be an April town hall. So we'll include that in the April 1 newsletter as a link. You'll be able to click on it, and then it'll also be available on the website. So if you all don't have, a program coming up soon, or you need one for a month coming up, this makes a great program.
Kathleen.
Yes.
One question that I think this work is fantastic. I think it's great. They did an excellent job and it was a great presentation. But for those of us that live so far down in South Georgia, we're almost in Florida. I'd love for the task force to consider locations other than north of Macon. That's just my little piece of information for you.
Yeah, and I can personally speak to that since I was kind of tasked with working to find a location this year. We need, just throwing this out there because we'll take all the help that we get. So if you know of anything in that area, that's what we're having a hard time finding. And for the cost effectiveness, so it's finding the hotel, but we always need at least 2 ballrooms because of the meal room and the business meeting. So that sometimes we'll find a great hotel that will only have 1. We usually like to find one with free parking. And then they have to have enough sleeping rooms for us. So I would, about maybe 150 sleeping rooms, 120, depending on that year. So those are a couple of the factors that you want to be thinking about. If you have suggestions in your area for certain hotels, please feel free to bring them to us. We would love, the more people doing the research, the better. So thank you for mentioning that. That's helpful.
I just
Yeah,
want to
Patty.
applaud the work of the committee. You can tell it was very intentional and professionally done and well thought through. And I'll be real surprised if most of those ideas aren't chosen to be implemented. Thank you very much, Kate, Stacy, for your leadership.
Thanks, Patty, and kudos to you. You were the finance chair when this decision was made to launch the committee and to make sure that we incorporated good concepts of change management. So really appreciate your leadership in getting this kicked off.
All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'm looking around waiting for someone to wave their hand. We will gladly give you your Saturday back. I do love when presentations and workshops are shorter rather than longer. It helps me absorb the information and also makes me feel like I wasn't doing P.E.O. all day, although I will be, but not here. If you guys have any follow-up questions, reach out to your officers, reach out to your board buddies. Your questions help us be more prepared for answering questions at local chapter workshops and just for our local chapters. But I look forward to seeing a lot of you at convention. Have a great weekend.